Welcome to Speak Sex. I am Eurydice. I'm your host. I am Greek from the island of Lesbos. I'm a writer and artist on the theme of female sexuality, and I started this podcast for the very literal cause of encouraging everyone to speak sex to each other without guilt, without self-consciousness, without ridiculous codes, without miming, and fluently. And so most of what we do here is educate each other by example, by osmosis, energetically. We tell our stories on the air, and we want everyone to listen in order to find their own voice and to, realize how we need to unlearn a lot of the lessons of our childhood and, early adolescence in order to gain our power. And I believe as a woman that the way to do that is for us women to get back the power of speaking about sex and asking for what we want and naming our desires so that we're no longer the object of the fucking patriarchy. And we've just, gained the right to give verbal consent to sex for the first time in written history. So we should just ride that puppy all the way. Because it's the one thing that the dominant culture has not regulated. Language, logos, is totally determined by patriarchy, as are all our customs and laws and, gods, principles, our ideas of right and wrong, light and dark, all the dichotomies, all that bullshit that we have taken on just by being part of this culture and this language. But because sex was, after all, the domain and the power and the genetic advantage of women, the dominant culture has not really taught us how to speak sex to each other. So this is our moment to insert ourselves into the culture. And I think that this is good for both men and women. But, my personal journey is to encourage women, my sisters, to find their voice and find their own, female subjectiveness and their own female gaze and their own female agency all the way through. So in this in this effort of speaking sex and speaking truth and speaking openly in a raw and direct and uncensored, unedited way with each other, unfiltered, I've invited today Enid Nolasco to be my guest because she runs something called a project called Raw Storytelling. And I just loved even the name Raw Storytelling, because so much of what we do these days with social media especially is heavily filtered, and edited, right, for content. So you can tell truth from lie. And we've entered this moment in history where no one knows even what news are true and fake. So raw, in my humble opinion, is the way to go for honesty.
Right, yes. It was definitely the intention.
Yeah, great. So her shows, through storytelling shows and a podcast, Raw Storytelling, provides any person from any background with the opportunity to share their life experiences and gather inspiration from those who also share. So this is a little bit what we're doing here. And you are an overachiever Puerto Rican.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
And she is also the founder of Witchcraft branding, which helps creatives, makers, and healers, claim their place in the branded universe. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's super special to be here.
Yeah, for me too. I'm looking forward to hearing all about you.
Yeah.
So my first question usually is about your own personal journey, Enid. It's where you came from and how you've got to where you are right now, and the heroine's journey. and potentially like the transformations or the revelatory moments, like the soul on the way to Damascus moments, where you realized, oh,
Yeah.
I've believed in the false gods.
Yeah. It's funny. So I was born in Costa Rica, and people usually are like, really? I lived there for only 3 years. And that's because I was born into a very unconventional family. It was my mom, my grandparents, my uncle, and my aunt. And that was my, like, to the point where I called my grandfather my dad. Like, that was our nucleus. And my grandfather, he worked for the American Embassy, and he used to move every 3 years to a different country in Latin America. So I grew up all over the place, and that really was a huge factor in who I am.
Yeah, it's a great cultural education.
I'm a mix of a lot of different things.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at one point, my mom was like, I'm done with this. And she actually moved to the United States and stayed there for like all of my like elementary years. So that's why I have an American accent. And I'm also very much American. I'm kind of like a mixture of all these different cultures. I'm American. I'm also Puerto Rican. I'm also Latina from other countries.
From all over Latin America.
Yeah, I'm a mix.
And where did your mom move? Where were you raised?
It was DC and Houston. Most of it was Houston, Texas. Yeah, and then my mom remarried when I was about 10 or 11-ish, and she remarried another Puerto Rican. My mom is Puerto Rican. She remarried another Puerto Rican. And at that point, we moved to Puerto Rico, and I was there for the majority of my
high school.
It was middle school, high school, and college, and that's why I say I'm Puerto Rican. It's what I know the most. It was there that I fell in love with like TV and film, and I went to study TV and film. That's what I have my bachelor's in, TV and film production. I was a video editor for 7 years. I had life happen, and I
want to know the life happened.
Oh, well, no, it was just I was a very depressed teenager. I was definitely like the invisible friend behind other people that were more popular. And I was just very sad all the time, and TV and film were my refuge. That is all that I watched and did. I didn't have any hobbies. So that was my safe place, and I read a lot of books, and I was a super nerd, which I love. I'm happy that I'm a nerd. Yeah.
Almost everyone who comes here is a nerd.
Yeah.
That's why
I love it. I loved it. I was super into anything that was like, I didn't dress gothic, but I did definitely enjoy, like, I love that culture of like being gothic and skulls and death and witches and demons and vampires. And I was just so into all of that. Yeah. And that was my happy place. And then I went to college, and I realized that I was really, really good at working, and I became a workaholic. Like, I'm really good at working, like to the point where I didn't make a lot of friends. I just worked a lot in college, and then I met who would become my wife for 13 years in college, actually. And I got married really quickly.
Very young.
But yeah, I was 22, and we moved to New York City, and we moved in really quickly. I had known her for a while. She was my best friend, and we moved to New York City. And then my eyes started to open to all the possibilities of everything, and every aspect that you can imagine.
Right. And other types of sexual experience.
Right.
And exchange. Yeah.
Right. And sexual experience and every, honestly, and it was like personal development. It was mental. It was just in every single aspect of life. My eyes opened when I moved to New York City.
Right.
And then from there, from there, I ended up in Miami somehow.
Well, we all do. From New York, we come here and we stay here.
I totally stayed.
I know.
Yeah, I live now in Fort Lauderdale, but we stayed in Miami. And along the way, I found branding. I had never heard of it before. I got obsessed with branding. When I got a master's in fine arts in branding, I opened my own business. I worked for like award-winning branding projects. And
what happened to the wife?
Well, I'm getting there.
Okay. So she moved down here with you.
Oh,
then?
yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And then branding, I was still super depressed. I was still, like I was married. I had all this awesome career. I was still super depressed until one day, somebody invited me to talk at, Creative Mornings. It's like a breakfast lecture series, an international one. I spoke there, and at the end of the speech, somebody asked, "So what's next?" And I hadn't asked myself that question ever. And I blurted out, "I want to start a true storytelling show." I don't know why I said that. I have no idea. It just came out. And then that was May 12th, 2017. And that was the day that life changed, because I started raw storytelling. Like, I met people that brought me to a group. Sorry, I know. Podcast blooper.
She gesticulates a lot, so every so often she's
I'm
gonna
Puerto
punch
Rican.
the mic.
I went to this group called Accent Club, and they helped me grow raw storytelling into what it is. I met a ton of friends there. It changed who I was, and I found the person that I am now. And because of that, I don't have a wife anymore. I do love her. She's amazing. She's my best friend on my entire life, but we're just different people right now. And got divorced 6 months ago.
Wowzy.
It's very recent.
Very fresh.
And raw storytelling keeps growing. And I've met so many different souls through this thing called raw story. It has changed my life.
Of course.
Yeah. Raw found me.
As it does. Yeah. Yeah. As this thing does, when you kind of put yourself out there and invite everyone in to join, especially if you do it like without, profiteering in mind. You just do it from a place of inclusion, and interest in like fellow humans. It just grows and takes over.
It's crazy.
Yeah, because we're all looking for authenticity. So much of what we do is like packaged and suspicious. So tell us a little more about Raw.
Right. So Raw Storytelling, it's like you mentioned, it's a monthly event that happens right now in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Right. So anybody can come, or do you figure, do you have like, do they have to apply? Do they have to volunteer?
Okay.
And you choose? There is some sort of editorial license?
So in order to speak at the show or to share your story at the show, you need to submit your story through the website. Okay. And I will say that we book up, like, it's first come, first serve, and each month has a theme.
Oh, okay.
And at this point, like, we book up way in advance. Like, I book, like, it's like you have to apply and you'll speak in like 2 or 3 months.
2-3 months, yeah.
Right. And before you...
And how long? I'm sorry to interrupt.
50, how long is you have up to 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Yeah. And how many people do you get?
5 to 6 per show.
Okay.
And before the show, you get a storytelling workshop call with me. So we'll have a call, and you tell me your story, and I'll help you make it even
present
better.
Present it better. And
So the stories are definitely curated in the sense that the storyteller has worked on it a little bit. But I will say that sometimes people either get cold feet, or they something happens in their life and they can't make the show. So when that happens, I do open it up to volunteers from the crowd, and the best stories have come from those volunteers that just off the cuff. Yeah. And then we have this thing called Too Raw to Share, which people in the crowd can write a raw story on a little piece of paper. And also those are great. So it's a combination of people who have really worked their story with maybe more raw ones. Right. Although they're all raw, but some are just not as thought through. Yeah. But it's the combination that really makes it special.
Right. Yeah. I have felt that, both for myself and as I've witnessed, other people, that when I've spoken completely off the cuff, driven by raw emotion, when you like start shaking and you get red, and you feel present. All like the electrical synapses going, like you are electrified, right? And you can't keep your mouth shut, so you bolt up and say your piece. That's when so much truth comes out, and you don't even know, half the time you don't even know that's part of your narrative. Yeah. Because when you are aware that people will hear, and then you get to rewrite it, you make it a little more like everybody else's shit.
There's benefits to both. There's that side where when it's off the cuff, the emotions are flying. Yeah. The other side of working through it for a little bit is that sometimes you don't realize the connections in your life that brought the story together. So when I work with somebody, I'm usually like, tell me where the story is coming from, and it almost always goes back to childhood or something in the past.
So you add like psychology.
Oh yeah, I don't have a degree in it, but I feel like I could.
You're getting one.
So usually they're like, oh, I didn't remember this, or I hadn't thought about this, and they start, and for them it's like a cathartic process.
Yeah,
where like they feel like they got something off of their chest that they have been holding on to for decades sometimes.
Yeah. Oh no, it's release. Yeah, and it all starts in childhood. I mean, let's be honest.
I think I would say almost all my stories begin with childhood.
Yeah,
really
because that's when we like make sense of the world. That's where we come up with our definitions, and they're so. I mean, there's like this little kid who is innocent and knows nothing, but has to make sense of the world and like protect herself and
absolutely
right. So then you go back, and when you access that stuff, most of us repress it, but forget it, whatever. But when you actually access that and then connect it to your truth now and who you've become now, right? Then it helps you understand why you see things the way you do and why you have responses that you have, and it also helps you kind of move on, turn it around once you
make the connections.
Right.
Like I call it the spider web.
Right. Once you make the connections, you can fix things a little bit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You can understand
so
why
what's the spider web
happen. I call it the spider web of like, because you go through life and it's like you have to go grocery shopping, you have work, you have family, whatever, and you're not thinking
you're like
in the picture.
Right, you're a robot of duty.
Yeah. So when you take time to work on the story for Raw, what I've seen is that people take the time to make the connections of the different parts in their life, and then like the spider web like starts forming of like how one thing leads to another, and then they start seeing how one thing affects another thing, and that happens even to me all the time, where I'm like, this happened when I was like 7, and this is why I am like this now. Like it's amazing.
I know. It's like it's kind of shocking also how much we have forgotten. Like I can be passing by some content, I'm like passing by a TV screen in a public place because I don't do TV at home. And this just happened like 2 days ago. And someone was playing like a TV procedural show or something. And they were saying, children. And I think it was like about a kid being abducted and raped. So luckily I was not abducted or raped as a child.
Okay.
I wouldn't know that. But, there was like someone saying that children who perform for adults non-stop in their childhood and like go around to strangers and sit on their laps and do a song and dance, are children who are emotional orphans and their parents are absent or whatever, gave a whole big speech and a name for it, or this type of like incest that happens. That's more like emotional incest rather than physical incest. But I spent my childhood doing that. And I never thought, I never gave it a name or a pathology or wondered. I thought, I must have been like a hammerhead in childhood, because but now, like, I'm going by the TV and I went on about my business. So I didn't see the rest of the show. I was a passerby, but it stayed with me because like you said, it just like clicks. That it brought back a memory of childhood that I have never investigated.
Right,
it's something that indicates something else. That's not like what everybody does. So what was that like 4-year-old needing that she went to strangers and like recited the Iliad or sang whatever black and white movie songs from the Greek movies.
You really are Greek.
I know. Why was I doing that? It's not normal, but it's interesting that we go through life and these little connections, like jolts of meaning come up.
Oh, absolutely. It happened with so many things, but like recently. So I didn't grow up with my biological dad.
Yeah.
And I never gave a shit. I was like, I didn't need him. I had a great family.
Right. You had the full family.
I didn't really.
Thank God.
I didn't really care.
So
I was like, I knew he wasn't there, but I didn't care.
Good.
And then recently I realized that because of that, I took on the role of being like the matriarch of the family because I was like, well, if there's no dad, I gotta take over and be. I mean, I guess it would be the patriarch, but I
but you're a girl.
I took on, yeah,
yeah.
So I took that. I didn't make that connection until now that I'm 35.
Wow.
And just things like that, or also that I, even with my own like sexuality, it was like people assumed I was a lesbian. They always assumed that just because I didn't have any interest in men when I was boys when I was a little kid. But I don't think it had anything to do with that. It had to do with like, why would I be interested in somebody who wasn't going to be there? It wasn't. It didn't have anything to do with sexuality. It had to do with psychology.
Right.
But those are things that I realized.
And role modeling from your earliest years.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because like the man who was around, your grandfather, was not like the potent male because he was an elder. So, you kind of like filled that job without realizing it.
Right.
As a kid, as you grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was definitely the man of the house, but I was not preferred. Like I was the first granddaughter. I was like his little he always had a different. With me, he wasn't like a dad. It was more just like the total grandfather role. So, yeah, I definitely filled that role myself.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, and I think that as we learn our identities and change our identities, which by the way I think is a very interesting and important topic right now because people believe that I have my sexual identity or gender identity or whatever other emotional identity, but it's gonna change, so like don't hold on to it too tight because like 10 years from now it can change. Most likely that's called evolving, right? So like
it is so funny.
It's okay it's normal for it to change and not normal to be like written in stone. But yeah, a lot of it is emotional and psychological rather than genetic. I feel that the genetic is a very, 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 very small percentage of us, and the rest we're just like products of everything that we and not just everything that we experienced and that happened to us, but how our own specific brain interpreted that,
right?
Because you can have like a sibling and they have a totally different interpretation of the same experiences. It's possible. So like forgiving yourself and allowing yourself space to like interpret and reinterpret and name and rename and label and relabel and just go with the flow and be
so
open.
Funny. Yeah,
it's important.
That's so funny. I've honestly been going through a flow since I can remember. Like it literally, like I change like my label every couple of years.
That's great.
Yeah,
I think it's super healthy.
Yeah. Well, I didn't realize it was healthy until recently. Like, because at the time I was just like, I don't know what I am, and then now I'm like, I don't really care. Yeah, I just am.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but it's so funny. I always the funniest for me is that I would say for 13 I was married 13 years. I would say I'm a straight person who happened to fall in love with their best friend who happened to be a girl. And that,
okay, that's complicated,
right? That was my line. I was like, for 13 years, I
don't even get that.
Okay, I was a straight person who happened to fall in love with their best friend.
Okay,
and their best friend happened to be a woman.
Right. Okay.
So I'm still straight.
So you were heterosexual when you mean straight? What do you mean by straight?
Okay. Heterosexual. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have been a heteronormative married lesbian. But only because you
I would have never said lesbian.
With a woman. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
I would have never. I would only use lesbian if it was like convenient to me to create rapport with somebody. It would be like, oh yeah, like I'm in the club, right?
Okay. So like if you were with lesbians, you'd find a connection somehow.
Right.
But that was it. Not to yourself.
Yeah, but if like on the street some random person would have asked me, I'm like, no, I'm totally straight. I just happened to be married to a woman. Right? I lived 13 years of that. It was kind of, and I wouldn't say it was denial. I really believed it.
Right.
It was, yeah.
But okay, so if I may ask, like, you've been with guys?
With one before.
One heterosexual?
With one before, yeah. before I married my wife, my ex-wife. So but in my mind, yeah, it's so weird. And then now since we've divorced, now I'm like, the funny thing is, as soon as she was the one who was like, oh, I don't want to be anymore in this relationship. And I was like, I was totally shocked. The first thought that I had after the shock was, well, I'm going to go back to men, obviously, because remember.
Because I'm being straight all these years.
Right? Okay, so I'm going to. This sounds so stupid.
No, I love it.
Okay, I'm going to go back to men, right? That was my first thought. So let's say for the first
2 days.
Yeah, like a week or 2 weeks or whatever. 3. You know what? I'm still in shock and this is happening. Right. I'm going to go back to men. And then as it starts to wear off and I start to calm down and, reality sets in that we're not together and the sadness is starting to be normal. I'm like, I remember to say I went to this event, just in Fort Lauderdale, and a networking event. And there was this really nice looking, I'm gonna say woman, I don't know how she identifies, but female looking person, a little tomboyish, not super feminine,
not lipstick,
and I was like, oh, she's
hot.
And then I remember thinking, wait, am I thought I was straight.
And then you're like, well, maybe she identifies as a boy and I can still be straight.
And I was like, this is so confusing.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, so maybe I'm lesbian because I have been with a woman for 13 years. And then I'm like, oh, but that guy's also really hot. And then I'm like, maybe I'm not as straight as I thought I was.
Oh my God. My God. So okay, so 15 years later, you figured out you may be bi.
Oh, yeah. Now I'm totally bi.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
and looking forward to it. Yeah. Whereas before, I would have been like, I really had these thoughts where I was like, oh, I would maybe have sex with a woman, apart from my ex-wife. I would maybe have sex with another woman. But I would definitely not date them or
emotionally invest.
No, it would just be a fun thing, right?
Yeah, sexual play. Yeah.
And it was I would shut down any thought of it being more than just a playful thing.
Yeah.
And then now I'm like, oh, but why not? I can just go why? Who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's very freeing. It's funny because I hate labels and hate it, and I'm a huge Dr. Kinsey fan and all that stuff. I don't want labels. I like my scale being anywhere on the scale.
Yeah.
And then now I feel more freedom saying that I'm bi than I had before when I was I don't want any labels.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, and again, the PC thing is to not speak for anyone but ourselves, but I think that we're all a little bi. And whether or not you express it and how much you express it, it's, again, a product of your upbringing and how you are used to seeing yourself in the context of culture, the general culture, right?
Yeah.
But if you're saying whether just sexually, are we capable of being bi? And also emotionally,
right.
Are we capable of, having emotional connection with either gender? Yeah. So
yes.
our prejudice or whatever, I don't want to call it that. So our own self-editing, right, is based on all kinds of comfort zones that have come up in our childhood, from our childhood on.
Yeah, and also self-imposed, because my family did not give a rat's ass that I was with, nothing.
Oh my God, rat's ass.
They
This is that expression I've always wanted to say. Anyway, go ahead.
It's super American expression.
I know.
So yeah, they didn't care. It was never an issue. They were automatically loving of my ex. They didn't care at all. So it wasn't I had family who would be giving me a hard time. No, it was totally self-imposed. Although I will say that I don't think that people realize what that they're prejudiced against like homosexuality or any other type of sexuality, they don't realize that at all. Because like even my mom, who's like super open, and she did not give a shit who I was with. The other day she was like, well, you're gonna die alone because you chose to not have children. And I'm like, well, it's not that I chose. It's just really hard to have children as two lesbians. I can't get pregnant unless I have a lot of money, which I don't have a lot of money. Right. So it's even, she doesn't even realize what she's saying. Mm-hmm. That it's not like I said, well, I'm going to become a lesbian so I can't have children. Mm-hmm. So it's really funny that they don't even people that are really, really open don't really realize what they're saying sometimes. Yeah. And life is just a touch more complicated when you're not heteronormative, on every level, like at work, legally. I mean, it's the rights that queer people have are so recent and could be taken away again, especially with the current administration. Yeah. So I see how people who don't want like anxiety, stress, and complications, don't want to complicate their life, may find it easier to just go with a hetero because it's the norm. It's the statistical norm. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean anything more than statistics, but it's convenient. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really is. And so unless like you've had an early, like where you had an early exposure to queer life, for whatever reason, you fall in love with your best friend. That's all it takes, but you both had like the courage to go with that, and what's the word? Consummate that feeling, of friendship, which everybody has. Like we all kind of like have a crush on our best friend, especially before we're sexual, when we're, in like middle school, we're more with our same gender friends. Right. So, kind of taking that to its natural expression, instead of like not and keeping it on like the friend level, then it allows you to understand that you can go either gender, and you understand your bisexuality early on. Yeah. Right. But I really think that the people who have not done that stay hetero because it's so convenient. Like you don't have to explain anything to anyone. You don't have to come out to anyone. You don't have to apply for any special whatever forms. I know. Yeah. It's stuff as simple, and it's going to sound so stupid, as simple as like who gets to drive. Mm-hmm. Because we're so used to, well, the men always drives or opens the door. And then when I first got together with her, it was like, wow. And I was also her first lesbian relationship. We were like, okay, so we had to figure out a whole new set of
who does what.
Yeah. And then which would piss us off when somebody would ask who's the man in the relationship. Eek. Later on, because we were like, no, we had to figure this out. And we were together, this is early 2000s, so this is before it was so common not common, but like so open as it is now. Right. We had to figure it out, a lot of it on our own. Mm-hmm. And when somebody asked us that, we're like, no. You're putting down all the work that we put in to figure out like what our relationship was, as two women, not as a man and a woman.
Exactly. Yeah. And for some people, like I think like some people also who find it psychologically difficult to be in a heteronormative relationship and let the guy like have the extra perks, like the veto power, or he provides the majority of the income, so he gets to say what happens, or decide what's for dinner. I don't know the cliches, because honestly I've never lived them. But there are all these cliches that you were free of that role modeling to a degree. I mean, you must have seen some of it with your grandparents. Right. But like, if you grow up with both parents around, that's what you have been shown. That's what you're supposed to repeat if you live unconsciously, right? So when you want to live from a conscious level, your first instinct is either to like repeat that or do the opposite and just like not do it at all, because that's what comes most easily with the least amount of work on yourself. Because
humans are lazy.
We are lazy.
In terms of like,
we don't have time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In terms of like, when you learn something, you kind of just don't want to relearn it. You're like, I just want to continue doing that because it's comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, like, I mean, as a mom, I never copied, modeled either one of my parents, but that was a conscious decision. I came out of very strong patriarchy, and I ran away from home when I was 15, and I came to LA, well, actually West Hollywood, where the movies are.
Oh, wow.
From the island of Crete, at the age of 15,
Wow.
because I lived in a family where like nothing was permitted, that I wanted to do. And it was all my dad, it was like his name. I shamed the name, or whatever, and I was a good kid. So I didn't really do anything that we would think now is not, appropriate. Like I wanted to join theater group or write plays, like, organize sit-ins and protests, whatever. But my point is, because I entered a new culture that was so different from mine, and I spoke a foreign language that was my third language or fourth language that I had learned, right? So the fact that everything was so foreign, the way everything was done, especially like in LA, which is not Middle America,
No.
and then New York. Like from there, I moved to the West Village and lived, at St. Mark's Place. So
You were in.
I was right in the middle of the, anti-culture,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't have to actually perform in any normative role. And my work was always in art and sex and, writing about sex and about, so, my art practice and my writing practice kept me outside the norm. And then I became a mom. And then without even realizing it, I started acting like my mother. Because that's all I knew.
Yeah. Because you didn't have time to.
No, how are you going to, like, you don't even know. Like, I mean, unless you've studied it, it's just like you and a baby, and all, like your body, like your hands, repeat what you remember.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like there is no other way. So, there are specific roles, like when you get married, to a man, where without even knowing it, you're just repeating what your parents did. In the most minute ways, and that's where it gets you. It might not be like the grand gesture,
but like all of a sudden you notice, like
the kitchen, the bathroom, like who make, like how, where you sleep, like the making of the bed or the serving of the dinner. I hate that word. The serving.
Yeah, I know.
Oh God.
I haven't lived in the same place that my family has for 13 plus years, and I honestly, I don't really see them that much. And when I do see them, I'm like, oh, this is where I got that from.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just a lot, or it's also a lot of realizing why you are the way you are. And it is like you say, of like, sometimes you're trying to be not like them, and it takes you on the other extreme. My grandmother always says like the extremes are bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's true, because it's like it's really is
right.
like, it's really like I don't want to be like maybe my mom or whatever, somebody else in my family, but then I go on the completely other end of it, and then create these rules in my mind that only they don't exist in the real world. They're absolutely in my head for no reason.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, there is a legitimate reason. The reason is they're supposed to keep you from becoming your mother.
Oh, yeah. True.
That's a good reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, it's hard to figure out, a fully developed way of being.
On your own.
Yeah, on your own.
Yeah.
And that's what we gotta do. Otherwise, we perpetuate the patriarchy. We perpetuate whatever you want to call it, this system. You can give it your favorite name. I call it that, but people can call it
patriarchy.
Yeah, but you can call it whatever is like your source of repression. But if you don't like try to consciously change things and do what's difficult, and you keep doing what you were taught, you perpetuate the system.
Yeah, and that's something that I think differentiates me from the people that I grew up with, even friends and family. Whereas like when I moved, especially to like New York, but actually also a lot of Miami, when I moved here, there's just a lot of being conscious of these things that are going around in your head and in society. And it made a whole lot of difference. Just being aware. Just being not ignorant about it made a whole lot of difference about everything, about life and also sexuality and every other aspect of like the human experience.
Finding like conscious space and holding it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And Miami is conservative. I mean, probably not as much as other parts in
Fort
America
Lauderdale.
that I haven't been to. But like the immigrant cultures that make Miami, they're conservative. Like the subcultures, all of them are like really ancient. Whether it's the Hasids or the Haitian community or the Caribbean island, community, which Puerto Rico would be a minor part here.
Mostly Cuban.
Yeah. But they all come from like male dominated, ancient, not ancient enough to be female dominated, but old cultures. So we like there's like the younger, more rebellious artistic community in Miami, and it's thriving. It's been growing a lot, because of whatever Art Basel and all kinds of other confluences. A lot of like the snowbird culture has helped, right? Because people have come from, urban centers like New York. But we are definitely coexisting and outnumbered by, these immigrant cultures. Even more recent immigrants like the Russians, all over Sunny Islands, very male dominated. And they've just come like in the past 10 years, or Chinese immigrants, so male dominated. So it's interesting, we gotta kind of like penetrate them.
I hadn't thought about that, but
we're like cultural spies.
Well, that's kind of, for me, the one comment that I keep receiving from my like raw storytelling shows is the melting pot of people that go. I literally have all ages, all genders, all races like come in, all types of people come in. And it's always different. It's always like 50% are repeats, 50% are new, because maybe they don't come every single month. And it's just a huge melting pot of people. And I love that. In the beginning, people were like, oh, but you're not seeing the same type of people. So how are you going to attract them? I'm like, I don't care. I just wanted to create a space where people can come and hear other people's stories. And that's exactly what's happening. So I think we're slowly but surely infiltrating them and just bringing them one by one.
Yes, one by one is how to do it. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Do you have the same space or you move?
So we every second Thursday of the month we're in the same space, and it's Cafe Collective in Fort Lauderdale. We did have a series of shows that happened outside of that in the beginning of this year. The last one will be in May in West Palm Beach, but we had one at the World Erotic Art Museum, which was really fun.
Nice.
But the goal, we're gonna go back to just doing the monthly ones at Cafe Collective for a little while, because we realized that. I realized that I say we a lot.
Yeah, the royal we.
Yeah.
Like the queen.
We. Yeah. I realized that dividing isn't necessarily like growth. It's actually like creating more of it isn't growth. It's just dividing the same people. So I'd rather like grow it and then figure out ways to reach more people, like through the podcast. That's I think my biggest goal right now is to hold back on having so many live shows and local shows and be able to have more content that I could put out podcast form, so I can reach more people outside of Florida. Yeah. Because these are stories that absolutely need to be heard everywhere.
Well, all you have to do, is tape your live shows.
Oh, I do, yeah.
And then get permission, and that can be your podcast.
No. The podcast is out there. Okay. It already started. We're actually, I think this month was our 7th episode. So if you search for raw storytelling and where podcasts are found, it's there. Yeah. It's just a once a month thing right now, and I want to do.
Yeah, it's too bad you don't have a backlog of whatever you had done before.
I do.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you had taped everything.
Oh, I from the beginning I knew that
Okay.
that whole purpose was to make a podcast.
Yeah.
So right now, what's out and on the air right now for the podcast is the shows that happened in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a bunch.
Okay, so
but
you have plenty of material.
I have plenty, but I want to do more because people want to send their stories that don't live in Florida, for example, or people who maybe can't go to a show want to send their stories. So I want to keep growing the podcast to where it's not only the live show stories, it's anybody can send a story from anywhere.
Right. So you can do the same thing that you're doing, with your like mini edits and everything, but then interview them on the phone.
Totally,
and they can like read it out for the 10-15 minutes on the phone, and that's your episode.
Right, yeah. So that's...
you could make... You just need time to edit everything.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I think you could have like hundreds of episodes.
Right, and that's the thing with having... It's all... I say, I learn from every single show. We're now going... I think it's going to be like 21st show or whatever, 20-something show. I learned from every single one something. What I learned from doing 2 shows a month is that it's not necessarily it's not fulfilling the bigger purpose, which is to get more stories out there. So now I'm gonna keep it up to 1 a month in Fort Lauderdale. And we might do some special ones out there, but it'll still be 1 a month. And then I'm really gonna focus on growing that podcast so that I can get more people's stories on there.
Yeah. So, and is this a labor of love, or is it actually something that you get paid to do?
It started out as a labor of absolutely labor of love. It was my 3rd job. I had a full-time job. I had a Witchcraft branding, and this was my 3rd, which is why the wife left me. You can see the pattern there.
Yeah.
So
the workaholic. I'm
totally workaholic. Yeah. It was labor of love, but now I'm turning it into a business because now I don't have that full-time job.
Oh, okay. Good.
So now my purpose is to be able to create a profit out of this so I can live off of it a little bit and then be able to grow it more. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And anything that involves like witchcraft and raw storytelling.
Those are the
major
magic
supporters. Yeah, major supporters of. So please continue to that's it. I think that that's especially as women. It's great for us to do something like this instead of work for a corporation or whatever people do. And again, there is zero judgment. It's super important, first of all, to make your own money. Yeah. So, to me, for all the women out there, most important thing is make your own money and don't depend on the guy's money. Because then you don't have to make all the endless compromises that we have been raised to make.
Yeah.
But secondly, once you actually have a resume and you are able to make money, there is nothing better than starting your own brand and starting your own business that speaks to your truth and your interest. Because once you start it, it will find its voice. You may not make as much money, but in exchange, you feel good about whatever you're doing in the world, for your... And I used to say tribe for your tribe.
For your coven.
Yeah, for your coven is much better because, now with Trump, I feel like tribal politics and the instinct of the herd are no. So coven.
Yeah. No, and I also like to say that I agree. I see nothing wrong with working for an employer.
Right.
I have considered many times where I'm like this because it is really hard to be an entrepreneur and work for yourself.
It's so hard.
You work
I second that.
10 times more than when you work for somebody else, and you make 10 times less.
You make nothing.
But I will say that I've considered many times going back, and I see nothing wrong with it. It's honestly, sometimes it's even. The most important part is to find what it is that you want in life. So, for example, I love working. So I feel proud of working 12-hour days. But I know a lot of people who just want to travel and not just, they want to travel, which is great, or they want to spend more time with their friends and family.
Well, they want to raise their young, which is time consuming.
Yeah, or they just want to come home and open a beer and have pizza, which sounds amazing.
And read a book.
And read a book and relax.
Especially like a book that's not that's like 50 years old.
Yeah,
Just saying.
that'd be fun. And the ideal lifestyle for that is to have like a day job that you don't have to worry about anything else.
Right.
And you know,
you go home
I
and you're
envy
done
them.
working.
I want to be like that, where I just relax. So I think there's no wrong path.
No, there's
at all.
no wrong path. But there's something again, whatever. I should shut up. But I'm saying there is something to be said for finding your own voice, your creative voice. You know, as a woman, you know, like men have done it so much for so long.
Yeah.
You know, and women are not used to it. So that's why I kind of like feel it's important to talk about it, because you know, women even now, like as an artist, I was doing painting and I was doing graffiti, and then I switched to embroidery and stitching, the hand stitch, you know, to a great extent in homage to like my mom and my grandma and my aunt. We would all sit on the porch and we would stitch away the afternoons, you know, and it was meditative. And so when I became a mom, it became something I could do with my daughter there, you know, even in the studio. It was just, you know, not as smelly and not as, you know, it was easier to carry around. And I found that it was more like street art. You know, everyone, you know, would walk in from the street. I had the studio at the Art Center on Lincoln Road and have their own like stitching and embroidery stories and narratives, you know, unlike like fine art per se and abstract art and, you know, performance art, which was a little more off-putting to the, you know, average person, viewer. But I found that women didn't buy art. They would not, you know, they would come in, they would talk, and then they would go buy the purse. They would buy the shoes. They would buy the, you know, makeup. They would buy the lipstick. They would buy like the facial. They would buy the facelift. They would buy the Botox. They wouldn't support the sister in her art practice because it's just not what they know, you know. And men would. So inevitably, you know, the art became more and more geared toward the male gaze again, however tongue-in-cheek, because that's the only thing I would sell. Same thing with like my healing practice. I have something called scribal therapy, and like I'm teaching, you know, I'm teaching people, and I want to say women, but it ends up being the men again. You know, kind of like the ancient practice of words as magic spells and alchemy, and how to, you know, cure and rework your consciousness, you know, find healing, find peace, find self-acceptance, and find your new self through reconnecting with the words, not the way the meaning that patriarchy gives us of words, but like the ancient alchemical, you know, magical meaning of the words. So again, you know, my vision for it was women focused, but the practice has been that, you know, 90% of my customers are men, and they come and they pay for the old, you know, ancient women wisdom, which really we should be gaining. But that's how it works, you know. So as women, we are not used and trained, you know, to spend our own income on anything that doesn't involve making ourselves being looking better for the male gaze.
Right. That is so interesting.
I know. So, you know, it's important to not only like make our money, but also like spend our money consciously and wisely, you know, in a new consciousness. So we gain that advantage, that power that we have, that we've been born with.
Right. With making our own money. Absolutely.
Exactly.
I love
you
that.
know? And, you know, I do think that women should try to have children and raise them, you know, more consciously and more, you know, more wisely again than we were raised. You know, to the best of their abilities. I mean, you know, no judgment. You do your best, but it's nice to try.
No, yeah. I agree. I love that.
Yeah.
And I get it. Yeah. And side note, I used to cross stitch with my mom. That's the thing that we used to do together.
It's so nice, right?
It's awesome.
I know. It's such a bonding ritual. Yeah, I think so too.
I agree.
And it's like, you know, for so many generations, it was like the invisible labor of women, you know, like there was no price for it. You know, men were like unaware of it being around, you know, all the doilies, you know?
Yeah. They thought they just came out of, I don't know what, like
yeah, they fell from the sky.
Yeah. I think they
and
grew
then
on
when
trees.
the girl married, like it would be her dowry, and that's what she would take from home to like this strange new place she was going on her own, and it was like a blessing. So yeah, there is a lot to it, I think.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Well, good. So thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
have to
you.
do this again.
I know, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for trusting me as your sex whisperer here on Jolt Radio. And until next week when I'll be back, please speak sex. Ciao.